So this was one question, multifold. So if there were no tax increases for the next 5 years, what programs at Mifflin would get cut? What is the impact to the programs mandated by law? When does the state take over and running the district? That's an easy answer, never. They wouldn't, because we would not be the only one. And then where does the money come from when the state does take over? And so that could speak a little bit to, I know, some conversation about the state completely funding education through a different tax source. So let's talk through the first two. It's hard to get into real specifics until you're faced with that situation, but to give you a general idea, so we have various mandates that are provided to us by state law. And so the primary one is what's called Chapter 4. Chapter 4 does lay out the mandates in terms of what your academic program should be minimally. And that's important to understand that it's a minimum expectation provided by the state. So if we were in a situation where we were not going to have a tax increase, and Diane will show some modeling to show what the implications of that would look like, and we would have to, as we showed payroll, and the largest percentage of our budget is people, that's where you have to turn, because just cutting some supplies here and there is not what's going to make a difference in the budget when you're talking about going a zero tax increase over multiple years. So we would have to look and say, what would be the bare minimum that we would be required by Pennsylvania law to provide? The other thing that we would have to look at is we are also given other state and federal mandates that we must follow. The federal mandates, keep in mind that there are federal mandates that we have to follow, but if you remember back from the earlier slide Diane shared with you, we only received $800,000 from the federal government, 1% of our budget. Yet there are significant federal mandates that we have to follow. So sometimes you might hear unfunded mandates. That's what we're talking about. Primary mandate is special education. So any students that qualify for a variety of services through special education, that comes from federal law. It's translated through the state of Pennsylvania, so each state is given their own power, if you will, to either go higher than IDEA, which is the federal mandate for special education, or just IDEA. So Pennsylvania has decided as a state, we significantly exceed the mandate of the IDEA, the federal government. And so with that comes costs, and I'll share some of that with you later. We have to provide health services, staffing. A lot of times we're given mandates in terms of what our staffing ratio needs to be. This is an interesting one. I don't know if too many people know about this, but transportation is actually not mandated. Providing school bus transportation is not a mandated program in the state of Pennsylvania. However, if you provide it to one student, then you need to, by state law, provide it to everybody. But as some of you may know, there are some students in our school district that will never receive transportation services because there are guidelines to, if you live within a mile of your school and have safe walking routes, you are not entitled to bus transportation. But one thing people don't realize, and we talk with parents sometimes about their students' behavior on the bus, and that it's not a right. It's a privilege, but that is not a mandate. However, if the law, I don't know exactly how it reads, but if you provide it to a group of students or one, then you need to provide it, and then there's rules around how you need to provide it. And then the other thing to keep in mind is we have employment contracts that would have to be consulted as well, whether it be class size language, whether it be other stipulations that might be in the contract. So those employment contracts, if we were going to change anything, would have to be either renegotiated or have to be followed in regards to thinking about this whole picture around what would have to be cut. And then lastly is we also have to think about what's the impact of any cut in regards to the overall school community. Because the expectations for performance don't go away. And so I put an asterisk there. If you remember back to the earlier slide about median age of 43, if you take a look at every year the National Association of Real Estate Agents study the #1 reasons why families move into houses. In the median age group of 37 to 51, in the top 5 is the performance of the school district. And so there's a piece that I learned a long time ago that how the school district goes, so goes the rest of the community. In terms of property value, resale value, that sort of thing. So that's the one thing too that we would have to be mindful of is if we start cutting programs in the school district and as families are deciding where they're going to move in, they shop around and look for school districts and the quality of those programs. So all of those things would have to be taken into consideration if we were to have start doing no tax increases and look at the growing deficit that we would have that Diane will talk through here right now.
Yep. So I figured the best way to show the story of what happens when you don't do a millage increase in consecutive years is to truly show you a snapshot of one of the pictorials from a budgeting model that we use to chart out the next 5 years worth of what our budget might look like. So what I'm going to explain to you is this blue line would be if there was no mill increase for the 18-19 budget and all the way out for the following 5 years. The light blue line is what I call a normal growth assumption value, which put in $0.5 mil in 18-19 and every year going out. And what you can see at the bottom is this 42,545 is what, because it's the second line, that is my current budget and the $0.5 mil every year going out. The top line is no millage increase and what our current real estate taxes would be at our current mills, and that number stays the same all the way out. Now, there was potential for some assessment growth, but the assessment growth in this district has been very, very small and minimal. So it is not worth trying to estimate that out because it actually has been almost non-existent. We're starting to see a little bit of an uptick, but it's fairly small. So you're going to see here in the first year, the difference is about $771,000 between these two line items. That would be, if we did no millage increase, with the budget the way it stands now, would be where we have to work with, what are we going to cut, what are we going to change, what are we going to manage to bring that $771,000 that we would lose from real estate taxes down so that our deficit was not so large to eat up all of our entire fund balance. You're going to see all the way out here in 2024, the difference now between no mill increase and a millage increase of 0.5 that continue, it's now $4.6 million. So it compounds every year. The next picture is going to show you even a bigger idea of what happens when you do that. So what this shows is our overall fund balance and what that fund balance might look like when we have deficits continuing to go out all those years. So here you're going to see the $700,000 difference again, but here, after the 6 years, you're going to see the cumulative effect of that lost revenue is $16 million. So I know, again, we don't want to trivialize and make it sound like we don't appreciate people on fixed income and how, if they're in a home of $120,000, how that $60 is too much for them. But I will tell you the cumulative effect of not doing that $0.5 mil increase could be devastating to this district as a whole over the course of several years. So that deficit just continues to grow. You will see, even with, based on the assumptions that I put in, even with that $0.5 mil increase, in 4 years, if my assumptions turn to be accurate, I won't have a fund balance, and we will have to do something drastic to make some changes. So even with a $0.5 mil, based on some of my assumptions, it's not looking so good. But without the millage increase, it's an additional $16 million over those 6 years that I would have to try and recoup.